Don't forget that this tutorial is part of a series of tutorials which you can access on our YouTube playlist, or alternatively, if you would like to, you can purchase the whole course on Udemy. There should be a link to the YouTube playlist and a link to our Udemy course, which should always provide the best price in the video description. Right, so let's go ahead and actually make a migration for our newly defined models, as well as giving you a little bit of information regarding how to manage migrations. We'll take a look at the migration files, not in too much detail, but just enough information so that you can start to work with the migration system and correct any common problems that typically a new developer might have when working with Django migrations. As this will be our first migration, there's a few things that we need to check. One of them is we go into our main core project folder, go to settings. We need to make sure that the application that we have created, in this case inventory, is actually registered with Django. A little bit up the top. So in installed apps here, we need to make sure that inventory has been added to the installed apps. Else Django won't be able to find the inventory app. Therefore, it won't be able to find the models. And therefore, when we migrate, it won't migrate those models into the database. Notice that there are other installed apps. These are the pre-configured installed apps. When we created our project, Django automatically add those. And like I may have already mentioned, some of these apps here, features, will require database access. So when we initially create our database, we will find there are some additional tables which have been generated from the fact that we have this defined here in our installed apps in the settings file. Right, so assuming you have configured the installed apps, just a bit further down, you will find the database configuration. We are using the default SQLite configuration. So this is the default configuration in Django when we create a new project. So SQLite is a file-based database. There is no additional installation. It will simply be created. The database will simply be created and we will be able to work with it. So let's go ahead and create our migration. As we have already seen in the previous tutorial, the first step is to run make migrations. So if you're running Windows, Python, manage.py migrations, here on the Mac, I'm going to type in Python 3 or /manage.py to run make migrations. So if we run that, you can see that Django checks the model file and it will return any errors to the terminal. Now, what's great about this is that it is fairly clear. It is very directed to the problem. So here I just need to follow the error. Inventory, referring to the inventory app, product line, that's going to be the product line in the model. Got it right here on line 66. And then we're just looking for the field in this case. It is a field problem. So if we take a look, we're told that the attribute value, there's an issue, there's a clash. So we're told here that there's a clash with another field presumably with the same name. So what we can do is, actually I've already added the SS, so that probably wasn't there on yours. So what we can do is just change the name, because what we'll probably find is this field is being duplicated here in the product line attribute value table. So let's go ahead and just change that. Now you may change the name completely. I'm just going to add an S to the end. That should resolve that problem. So that's the first problem. Now sometimes there's a whole bunch of issues here, and I like to work step by step. So I think I've resolved that one. So now you can see there's less errors. So we have another error now to fix. So that's inventory product line price. So it looks like here we must define a decimal places attribute, and we must also define the max digit attribute. So those are the two attributes that are mandatory when we use the decimal field, which we have forgotten to include. So let's just go ahead and add that. So decimal places. So here we're just going to define how many decimal places. That's going to equal, in this case, 2. Here I'm assuming that I'm using pound and pence. So that's 2 decimal places in the UK. Maybe in your currency it's slightly different. And then the max digits, as the name suggests, that's the maximum amount of digits, including the decimal places. Digits. So that's going to represent, in my case, 5. Here you are actually limiting the maximum amount of numbers you can include in this field. So do be careful. If you've got something you want to sell that's 10,000 in this case pound, then obviously that's going to be 5 digits. So you need to make sure that you include the right amount of digits for the maximum price potentially that you're going to include in this field. So with that set, that's pretty good going. That should now be complete. So you can see that we have removed, or we've dealt with all the errors, and now we're given a snapshot of all the actions that will take place when we migrate this to the database. So all of these tables that we have defined in our Django models will get created once we actually run the migrate command. So we can now inspect the migration file that's been created from this process. So in inventory, we have migrations file, and then we have the initial migration file, 001 initial. And inside of here, it looks like the resources have been added. And these then are the instructions, if you like, that's going to be used to actually run the migration process, to actually build, in this case, the tables correlated to the models file that we have been developing over the previous tutorials. So we have the attribute table, seasonal events, and so on. You can see here the fields that are going to be created, as well as the attributes and specifications of those fields. So this, if you like, is a record of the migration that we're just about to undertake. This is going to allow us to keep a record of all the changes that we've made in our database. So it's important to note at this point, we haven't actually touched the actual database yet. We've simply just created a file in preparation now to migrate this to the database. That does mean, of course, if you have made a mistake, if you do want to make some changes at this point, all that you need to do is go into your migrations file and just delete the migration. So just delete that file. Now, be careful not to delete the initialization file here. Be careful not to do that. Just delete the initial file, and then that will just roll you back to the previous state.